Radio, where gamers roll.
You're listening to Prime by Cortex, a podcast where we sit down to talk Cortex Prime news, mechanics, and interview folks who are writing for the creator studio. I'm Kirby, and I'm here with my co-host JT.
Hey!
And in today's episode, we're sitting down with Mellie.
Hello.
Very excited to have you.
Super duper excited to be here. I have been enjoying this podcast quite a bit.
Aw, thank you so much. We appreciate hearing that people in the actual business are aware of the podcast.
Yeah, we noticed you. We're watching.
Yeah.
At least I am.
I appreciate it, yeah.
So Mellie, you are currently employed by Fandom, right? How long have you been with Fandom? And in your own words, what kind of work do you do with Fandom?
Yeah, I've been with Fandom for a couple of years now. I guess like 2.5-ish years. It's been an exciting journey. I am currently the Cortex RPG and D&D Beyond community manager. When we're recording this, that just happened yesterday, so it's very fresh, exciting news. I call it my Cinderella story because I was a super big fan of D&D Beyond, got really into it, was super active, just became a part of the community, and then I became a moderator. Then Lauren Urban, who was the D&D Beyond community manager before me, she wanted some extra help, asked me, and since then I've just been like doing more and more little things, which grew into Cortex community management and this now my amazing life that I never expected to have 2 years ago working in tabletop gaming. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I guess, I personally am amazed by, I've heard so many people talk about how they got their start in the industry just by being involved and just being a fan. Eventually, their sort of participation and contributions led to them actually getting a job doing, what they love. So that's really cool to hear that.
Yeah, they always say, right place, right time, but I really think it's all about the right place, right attitude, and just do the thing that you love and work hard at it and be nice, and people are usually going to notice that.
Yeah, definitely word to the wise. So, how did you actually get into the hobby in the first place, role playing and all that?
I have always loved creating stories. I was the kid who did the most extravagant make believes and wrote hundreds of pages of stories as a kid. And so tabletop role playing was an easy jump from that, a place to share my imagination with friends. So I actually got into it because of a boyfriend of my sister's. They wanted a cleric, as everybody does, and they didn't have anybody willing to play one. So the little sister gets asked, come and heal us, and you can sit at the table with these cool older people. I thought it was the cool older people sitting at the table in the basement playing tabletop games.
Yeah, from my experience, little sisters are very good in those spots. I actually had mine DM one time when I was younger because I wanted to play. I didn't want to DM, so I was just went to my 8-year-old sister. Was like, "Hey, this is Dungeons and Dragons. Would you mind running an adventure?"
It's so true, and we're so eager. We're like, you want to hang out with me? I mean, yeah, I'll hang out with you.
So as far as getting involved in Cortex, when that exactly happened in your sort of trajectory to where you are today?
My first brush with Cortex was super long ago, 10 or 11 years, and it was Supernatural. A friend of mine, we watched the show together at that time. That was when it was coming out still. And I guess it might still be coming out. I don't know. I stopped following along, but we watched it together and they were like, "Did you know this was a thing?" And we started playing it. And we didn't last long just because it was hard to get together at that time. It stuck in my mind. And then a year, 2 years ago, there was just some rumblings about it again. And then last year, with everything happening with Cortex Prime actually coming out and everything, I've dove in head first, and now it's all I want to do. And my friends will tell you that I am very annoying with how I just tell them, "Oh, we want to play a game? I can do that in Cortex. We don't need another game. it's Cortex. We'll just do it in Cortex.
And at this point, you're neck deep into Cortex. Not only are you involved as a moderator of the server, your work at Fandom, but you're also on the actual play Roll and Keep, which is on Twitch and YouTube. You all just finished Hammerheads, and for listeners at home who haven't been following, they're about to do Tales of Xadia.
Yes, yeah, it's super awesome. I am super glad that I get to do it because it's with very cool people like, I don't know, like Cam Banks, the person who made the game. So playing with him is incredible, as well as Joe Starr, Lisa Pearl, Vanessa Guerrero, and we had Adam Bradford with us in Hammerheads. He will not be joining us in Tales of Xadia, but he was amazing. It's just such a like cool, fun thing to get to do as a work engagement.
So, can you tell us at all about who may be coming back, or if there are any new faces for Tales of Xadia?
Yeah, nothing that we can say as far as if there's going to be somebody coming back or maybe like a guest star, but it is something obviously
Okay.
would be very, very exciting for us. But I can say that we're going to be playing through the official playtest, so the Lost
Oh, perfect.
Oasis. So you'll get to see us go through it, us learning it, because as familiar as Cam is with it, and I'm pretty familiar with it, Vanessa, Lisa, and Joe aren't as steeped in it all. So it really is here's us teaching everybody how to play this and learning and look at how this goes down at an actual table. And it's going to be pretty fun. We'll be playing playtest characters, the ones that are in the package. So you'll see how those work out and how to use the different effects on their sheet. So I think it'll be a really good like learning tool for a lot of people coming into the community that are only familiar with the Dragon Prince and don't really know what Cortex is or even what a tabletop role-playing game is. So it's a really exciting opportunity to get to show that on stream.
Yeah, I was actually really excited when I got the PDFs for it the other day, and I was looking forward to running that. So it might be actually really good to get to sort of watch how that works in practice first. So thank you. I'll definitely be taking notes.
I think Tails is trying to take some of the Cortex mechanics and do something a little different with them than what's already been laid out, and I'm pretty excited for that. Now, for our listeners who don't know, haven't watched Roll and Keep yet, it is supposed to be like a rotational thing. So we have Tales of Xadia next, but afterwards, you're actually going to be GMing your own campaign, right?
Yes, originally it was going to be Eidolon Alpha, which is the setting I will be GMing coming up after Hammerheads. And then it just made sense. If we're putting out this Dragon Prince playtest, we should just play some Dragon Prince. It'll be amazing. But I will be running Eidolon Alpha coming up, and it's going to be awesome. Eidolon Alpha is one of the settings in the Cortex Prime game handbook, and it is a Greek mythology inspired setting. I was the nerd that nerds would push into lockers as a kid. I loved mythology to an embarrassing level, I would say. So I'm very excited to get to do that one. That's definitely like my favorite of the handbook. And it's going to be pretty wonderful. We have art done for the characters already, and they look great. It's going to be super duper fun.
Ooh, I'm excited. I mean, I was already excited before, but now hearing you say that makes me even more excited.
Yes, just the crazy things that I'll get to pull from my like mythology background. Let's be fair though, it is like my 3rd to 5th grade mythology background. I'm not some smart person. I'm just a nerd.
No, I'm right there with you. I'm pretty much just like a YouTube Wikipedia scholar when I
Yes.
pull stuff for that kind of thing.
And I also love Greek mythology.
Yeah, we have the trivia
Oh,
locked
for
down.
sure. Roll and Keep's been really cool, and so I know Cam's been running that, and I know you played sort of like Russian sort of former KGB character in that, and that looked like a lot of fun actually.
Yes,
And you were
yeah.
also sort of like the quartermaster, if I'm not mistaken, as well, right? Because you were sort of keeping track of the items and things.
Exactly. Yeah, I was the default person to do that because I was the next most familiar with the rules after Cam. Which that's a wide gap there between game designer and Mellie, but it is still a good spot to be in. But I was the one that had the most familiarity, so they just defaulted to, you know what? You take care of that, and we're going to focus on learning the game and being amazing people.
Well, I've also seen that you have some pretty awesome spreadsheets out there too. So I imagine that those come in handy too.
I do love my spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, same here. So thank you very much for what you do with that stuff. It helps everybody in the community. So
Yeah, as much as I don't want to be associated with my Russian hacker character,
Mm.
there are parts of my ability to manipulate technology that are, helpful to the situation and are not hacking, but that impress the people around me because they're maybe not from my same generation.
They're just like generally well done spreadsheets, to be fair. Like for our listeners specifically, we're talking about the character sheets that Mellie has done for Cortex for her games, and that she's put out there. And I've spent an embarrassing amount of time trying not to like do the scripting that you've done, but you really took it to like the next level with your spreadsheets.
Yeah, I really just wanted to make a super easy experience to force my players to play Cortex, because that's what I wanted to GM. So I was like, if I just make this really easy, they can't say no because they'll have these great easy tools that they'll just click on buttons and it'll make their dice pool when they click the buttons. So I put in a lot of time in that, but it was totally worth it because it made it, again, they actually were willing to try a new game with me, and now I will not let them escape.
well, yeah, you got to hold on to them while you can. The role playing groups don't come around, just out of nowhere. So
Exactly.
Yeah, I do the same pitching with my players with be like, well, you want to play Avatar The Last Airbender? You've been talking about that for a while. I know the perfect game for you. And just get the foot in the door, whether it's like fancy spreadsheets or just like their favorite IP. Like you just gotta reel new people in, I think.
Exactly. Just give them a taste, just a little sample, and then they'll be hooked. And they're stuck with you. You're their dealer now. You're their Cortex dealer.
Mellie, you don't actually just do spreadsheets, right? You've been doing some writing for Cortex, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a little bit here and there. I have like a bunch of projects that I can't share because either it's just like this is 100% my like personal world, and this Cortex document is 100 pages and I would not force that on anybody, or it's like this is an actual IP and so I have to just keep this to myself even though I think it's really really cool. But I do have one that I shared that is called Half Hearted. It was for the second Cortex Confab, which, for those who don't know, is we have 10 days to create a Cortex setting or a mod or some other kind of like Cortex content. I wanted to do a dating sim Cortex game. I was inspired by a friend who had tried to do a dating sim in another system that wasn't quite as good a fit, and so I was like, "I'm gonna try to figure this out." And then it became like a monster dating sim because I was thinking like, what's better than people dating? And it's monsters. Like I want to see like the werewolf and the creature from the Black Lagoon trying to woo each other. Like that sounds great. So it kind of ended up turning more in that direction the farther I got with it. But it's kind of fun, kind of cute.
yeah, I wasn't familiar or as familiar with that whole genre of otome, but I was like looking over that, because I was reading through your confab, and I thought that was very creative. I actually was surprised by how well Cortex could be adapted into like a dating simulator.
Yeah, that's like the thing that I've just fallen head over heels for Cortex with is just you can do anything with it. There was a confab spotlight that we put on, I want to say it's Burden of Proof by Element, that was like the GM and the players are actually in competition with each other. They're still telling a story together, but they have different like end goals for this game. And I was like, that's such a cool idea. And you can do that in Cortex because you can just make these mechanics really fit so many different cool creative ideas for whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and I think it's just really unique, because there are obviously, Cortex games that like focus on things like relationships, like there was Smallville and things like that. But especially for something as intimate that's like a dating simulator, I thought that it's kind of really cool. And it sort of requires players, I think, a bit to sort of put themselves out there and be vulnerable just to sort of get into the genre. And you've got all the stuff there for it. You're basically focusing almost entirely on these relationships between the characters and seeing how those pan out.
Yeah, it really is. And one thing I wanted to do with that, because it is a much more like sensitive thing to be role playing about, and comfort level wise, is to like point out the ways that you could do this without like one set GM, so everybody kind of feels like they're all in control of these different characters. So it's less like one on one. This GM has to flirt with everybody at the table. So I put in a bit where there's a bit of like a rotational GMing. So each scene, a different person will take that on. And then, you go through setting up the scene and you go around the table and everybody kind of adds in an aspect of the location. They add, here's this GMC that's here, and everybody's going to add in, what is their style? What's their gender presentation? What's their reputation? So everybody kind of gets to work together to build these characters. So then everybody kind of is invested in whatever romance or quirks that they come up with. It's not for every group, but I do think that you get the right people together and it can be a really like heartfelt time or a really just funny, campy enjoyment.
In addition to sort of the creative world building, one thing I really liked was how you have these different ways of expressing your feelings and love. And I thought that that was really cool because it just felt really true to life for me. Like some people, make like gestures of, gifts or things like that. And other people just want to spend time with you. And there's just like all these different ways for people to sort of interact and express their feelings. And I thought that that's something that you don't see a lot in a lot of role playing games, even the ones that do focus on more of the social
Yes.
aspects and the relationships. So very cool for you to go there and do that.
Yeah, I will say that like having so that's I believe you're referring to distinctions. I have love language as one of the distinctions. It was like the very first thing that came to me with this entire thing was, hey, those like love languages, like you read that book or like you take the quiz, like what's my love language? That's exactly like that has to be the core of this game, has to be love languages. How do I make that fit in? How do I make that important to the GMCs so that there's some kind of like interaction between what you're doing for somebody and what they want? And so it was pretty fun trying to kind of build around that idea of love languages and then getting everything else to fit in with that.
That was good. For listeners at home too, if you go ahead and check out Half-Hearted, Melly also uses a lot of the different trait sets and components from the Cortex Prime handbook and sort of shows how they can really flow together flawlessly. So even though you have all these different components, they're sort of all working together to set the mood and emphasize the themes and highlight the different character options and things. So really great example of how to put all those elements together to create the setting you're trying to go for. We'll get a link in the show notes maybe so that it'll be easier for our listeners to check that out.
Duh. Well, thanks.
For Half-Hearted, is it more of a like one-shot scenario type thing, or can it be long form, or can it do both?
Yeah, so it can do both. So you can definitely run it one and done, and then at the end. So I take the growth mod, the growth pool mod from the Prime Handbook, and I turn that into like how you grow the relationships that you create. So you're going to be building up a pool of dice with a GMC or even a PC. Then at the end of a session, if you want to improve the relationship with that person, you want to ask them out on a date, if you're already dating them and you want to like ask them to go steady or something like that, then you're going to gather up your pool of dice and you're going to try to roll them to improve that relationship. So then you have a tag scene where you're going to, ask them out on a date. So on a one shot, that would be, the end of the session, and we're going to go around the table and everybody will have their tag scene of asking their person on this date, whoever they've been trying to romance for the session. And a longer term campaign, then maybe people aren't doing that every session. that may be like longer journeys to those relationships that you can kind of go through as you progress through the story.
Yeah, and it seems kind of like the genres too. I know that you created, was it called Dark and Stormy? I think was the setting that you came up with. And like you were saying, that's sort of like monster love and things like that. But it really looks like it's a great framework that you could pretty much, incorporate almost any type of setting you want within the context of like the dating simulator.
Exactly. Yeah. I originally actually had 3 ideas for different like settings that you could stick half-hearted onto, and I was going to do them all, and then I was like 10 days is not enough time to actually do that. So I will instead pick one, my favorite, which was monsters, cuz I love stories about weird things falling in love. That's just very charming to me. And also my friends and I have jokes about that kind of stuff that just appeal to us. So Dark and Stormy went out, but I also had like a fantasy centered one and a sci-fi centered one, and you could do one that is just slice of life, just a normal world, no special powers or anything, just normal people.
I like that a lot. I have made it a little bit of an annual thing to do a sort of dating situation, is specifically emulating Hallmark movies. But I would love to actually bring this to the table next time I run that. Would you say that it's more of a well? It sounds like it's pretty flexible in terms of what kind of romance is going on. I kind of imagine that it's maybe not so much for Hallmark, but more for like, man, me realizing that I don't read too much like romance or play too many dating sims, because I can't think of anything other than Dream Daddy at this very moment.
I mean, you could definitely like a Hallmark movie. Oh my god, I love that idea, and I think that it would totally work with this idea. And I would honestly love to see that to the point where I'm gonna mark down that I should go through and do the revisions I need to do, so that you have a more playable game to do that with. Because that is amazing.
The key component to any good Hallmark game is really just introducing ice on the floor that someone can slip on to then fall into the arms of whomever they're going to fall in love with that session.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you have in those movies and just in like romance in general, is you have places where there's, a misunderstanding or a conflict of people's values where they're just not quite like meeting in the middle. And I think you could do that with this. And
Mhm.
also, like I use the stress mod in this as well, but I've attached it to values, which it's possible somebody has absolutely done that. I haven't seen it yet, but I was like, that makes sense here. And I'm using Shaken and Stricken, which I've renamed Rebuffed and Rejected, so that your values are what are taking stress. So you're maybe having those challenged in order to have a better relationship with somebody, because nobody gets completely along with the people that they love. There's always disagreements in those values. So that was really important to me. And I think that that could be like narrated in such an over dramatic and soap opera y kind of way that like the Hallmark movie would have an amazing emotional climax.
I think it needs that, to be honest. Whether it's like a Hallmark movie, which they frankly like hone in straight to the romance as quick as they can, but I think with any like romance medium, if you want to do something more than a short story, then you need to have those conflicts to like drag it on for longer than an hour in terms of like screen time, right? And so at
Exactly.
a session, like I imagine if you're doing a 2 to 4 hour session, you need to have those misunderstandings. And, I imagine that the payoff there is going to work out like wonderfully.
I was going to say, even the idea though that there are different sort of like subgenres and just like different types of romance stories out there, and it seems like this really would be a good framework, I think, to be able to explore those different kinds of ideas and themes. Whether it's things like unrequited love, or the couple that has like the misunderstanding or goes through a fight and then sort of learns to accept the things that they don't necessarily care for, like learn to appreciate their differences, things like that. So it just seems like there's a lot of potential there.
And honestly, if there's anybody listening to this who wants to just make a setting in Half-Hearted that's completely different than the horror-y one that I have, I would love to see it. There's so many different dating sims out there in the world, and they are all delightful, even the one that is about pigeons.
Or KFC.
Anything can be a dating sim.
I was not aware of that.
It is very delightful. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it is a delightful look at Otome games, and there we go, Hatoful Boyfriend. So
Ooh, I know that one.
take a look at that because it is great. And again, a dating game can be anything.
So you've been working on this project, and you've been working on other like more personal projects and stuff. What have you learned doing any of these projects that you think other creators should keep in mind when they're doing their own work?
Oh man, great question. I guess don't get stuck on something because that is a problem I think that can be really easily fallen into. With Half-Hearted, I had what my 3 prime sets were going to be, and I was building around that, and I was really set on this one mechanic that I was going to use, and I just kept getting stuck, and I couldn't figure out how to make it work. I ended up completely changing my original plan, other than the love languages, is the only thing that I kept. And that's happened with pretty much all of the things that I have done, even for myself, is that I had one idea, it seemed great, and then I hit a wall with it and changed it. So don't get too attached to your prime sets. I even tell my players in my fantasy world is if we decide partway through that we don't really like this trait set that I picked, let's just change it because we can do that. So just feel really comfortable going with the flow and feeling what actually works best for your setting and don't get stuck on what you think would work best.
Wow, yeah. I think that that's definitely advice that we could all take to heart because even I know when I was working on my confab too, I was just sort of like really just going back and forth, figuring out, oh, how do I want to implement this and like what's the best way to represent what I want to do. But I feel like that's a good attitude to have is sort of, be open to changing things that you don't think
Mhm.
work and just sort of experiment and stuff like
Try everything, everybody. Try
Maybe
everything.
not in the same game, in the same game session, but yeah, you should absolutely you should try all the traits that Cortex has and just take them for a test drive, even if it's just for a session or two.
Yeah, you might, like, see a trait set and think, "Eh, not for me," and then you play with it and you realize, "Oh, actually, like, this kind of fills a niche that I really wanted to have filled."
Speaking of niches, I don't know how much you would want to comment this or not, but do you have any either genres or settings that you would really like to see, be implemented in Cortex or like see someone's take on it?
I love witches, so I want a really cool witchy something. I kind of tried to do it myself and I've given up on it for now, but I want something witchy for sure. And I want like something that's a really cool horror something that really evokes horror in a great way. Because I love horror movies. So those are my 2 big ones. Something witchy doesn't have to be horrific. Could be like teen witches doing fun magic stuff like The Craft, or it could be super horrific and just combine both those ideas.
I'm not sure if we're going to cut this out or if we're going to go there or not, but Kirby has a really great horror idea for Cortex that I actually got to play test. And I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that on this show or not, Kirby, at all, just now that Mellie's brought it up.
Tell me.
Oh, I'll talk about it. Well, like first, we got to tackle what is horror. No, I'm kidding.
Part 2
But
of this
yeah,
episode.
Yeah.
but yeah, I have 2 horror games ideas, and only one of them has hit the table so far. Tentatively called Jump Scare, and it's supposed to like replicate the sort of slasher horror movies. So like players are your typical archetypes, and I think the big thing that I want out of that is like when your character dies, that's not at the end of your gameplay. You'll be able to play as like a lost soul, and you'll be able to still engage with the game. But during gameplay, while you're still alive, you're basically accumulating XP to then spend in your afterlife to help the remaining survivors or to have a say in the story, that kind of stuff. And then the other ones, like I really personally would love like a horror game that's kind of like Haunting of Hill House, right?
Yes.
But I feel like that needs like its own Cortex build as compared to like a slasher film.
Yeah, oh my gosh, jump scare sounds super fun though. How do I get a look at that? Because I want to look at it.
Well, if you want, I can send you 100 JPEGs of all the napkin notes I've taken. Um, but yeah, I've started a small server for it, and I should really get on the horn of like cleaning up the document and actually like letting other people run it. But yeah, I could send that your way.
Yes.
But yeah, like I think there's a lot of room for I think just magical settings, whether we're talking like witches or we want to do like Harry Potter knockoffs or whatever have you. I think what could be interesting is like Sabrina Chili Adventures, like Netflix
Mhm.
type thing. But then, there's also a lot of fun to be had with, say, like the new run of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics, which actually gives Willow's her own spin off where she's a witch. And I mean, I would absolutely want to explore that
Mhm.
sort of setting in Cortex.
Yeah, and like even The Craft had a sequel that came out last year, so like witches are in. Let's make lots of witch things. If you do have a witch Cortex creation, please give it to me. Send it to me. I want to read and play it.
Yeah. Send it to Kirby and me too. Send it our way, and maybe we'll get you on the show to talk about it. Who knows?
I'm pretty sure Millie has the Cortex Discord server set up in such a way that as soon as you link it to the Discord, it just tags Millie.
Yeah, it gives me a little alert on my phone. Hey, somebody put the witch game up, so go play it. Yeah, so yeah, if you do have that, the Cortex Discord is where you should definitely drop it, and I'll see it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's also we talked about the confab earlier, but that's also where the confab discussion and action happens too. And those confabs happen periodically, and yeah, it's just 10 days of people. It's like any writer's room, right? It's 10 days of people lamenting over their work and then finally pushing it out. And people have just pushed out like wonderful stuff. Like you talked about how the what was it, Elements
Yeah.
was posted as a highlight feature. That was the one that I reviewed, and that's also part of the confab. Is you'll post your workout, and two people are supposed to review it. And yeah, it's a fun time. So just come to the Discord server, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a super great space for creators, and yeah, the confab is a just super cool time. Just seeing what comes out of it. When I first started with Cortex, one of the first things we did was the first confab, and I was blown away by the things that people created. And it inspired me so much to be like, okay, this is a real amazing thing, and I need to do everything in my power to make it awesome and popular and show people all these cool things that people can make using this Cortex.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed with the more vocal confab writers, to say the least, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are doing the confabs and maybe not submitting something or whatever have you, right? But I do notice that there are a lot of people who are participating in the confab who have written stuff for other game systems like
Mhm.
D&D or whatever have you, like Jeremy Forbing, who we had on the show. He's done stuff for D&D. But basically, where I'm going with this is, Melly, have you written work outside of these confabs for other systems that people can maybe check out?
I have actually. I've done just some mechanics stuff for D&D 5th edition. I have a couple of stuff subclasses up on the DM's Guild, including an artificer one that I made even like look pretty and stuff. So pretty fancy. And then on D&D Beyond, where I have an account, obviously, because I'm the community manager, I got a ton of homebrew that I posted over there. Smaller stuff than a whole game, but it's still pretty fun.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely put those in the show notes too, because people deserve to see it. And also going back to the Cortex Prime Discord server, one of the other draws is Mellie is there too, so you'll get a chance to talk to her and tell her how much you loved her interview on our show and how she should come on it again.
Yeah, there's me there, there's Cam there, the designer of the game. Dan Telver, who's the narrative designer for the game, is also in there. He doesn't like talk much, but he is present and might, come out of his shell on occasion. But yeah, there's lots of amazing people to talk to on there, including JT and Kirby are there.
Yeah, we kind of
Yeah.
lurk, interject
We're
sometimes.
around.
Yeah. But yeah, you'll also find just like all the other confab writers. But you know what? We JT and I would be remiss if we didn't inspire you, like we inspired Jeremy Forbing to write Vampire Mechs, to do another project. But whether you do another project or not, we definitely want to have you back on the show, whether it's like the completed final version of Half Hearted, which I'm personally looking forward to, or maybe you finally taken up the mantle for writing some witch stuff.
Maybe. It is bare bones written. I have
Mm.
one page.
Are witches featured in Half Hearted?
Yeah, there is a witch archetype as one of the dark and stormy ones. And the archetypes are pretty simple in there. They're just kind of like some highlight values and an SFX. But the witch I actually haven't even finished. Like I said, half-hearted did not get 100% done and ready.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I think it definitely you can definitely make it work with what you've got, and also that's what confabs are for. Kind of is just getting it out there, getting feedback, and being able to work on it if you want, or then you can always go for a totally different thing the next time. Speaking of which, I just need to say, and you don't have to comment at all, but I would love to be able to participate in another confab, so I'm looking forward to potentially more in the future.
Yes, I'm actually happy to say that we'll definitely have more in the future. I think you can look forward to a couple this year, and that we may be looking into doing some themes for some confabs. So there'll be some fun stuff coming.
Yeah, it's really weird. I think you were saying that the next theme was going to be witch base. That's pretty on point.
Yeah.
My evil plan has been revealed.
That's
So, Mellie, are you more of a Cortex player or GM when you're not on Roll and Keep?
Not on Roll and Keep, definitely more of a GM. I've been just a GM through most of my tabletop career. It's where I'm just used to being. But if people want a GM for me, I'll take it.
It sounds like you're largely coming from a D&D background, right? Do you have any advice for dungeon masters who are looking to make the jump into being a Cortex game moderator?
Yes, it is not as complicated as you think. Whenever you go from like one rules language to another one, it's gonna seem difficult, and there's like words that are the same, but they mean different things all of a sudden. And that's the biggest hurdle that I found with helping some of my players learn Cortex when they've just played D&D for a decade, 2 decades, and then myself when I was first jumping into it, is that it is simpler than you think. Like, just step back and don't overthink it, because it is really more about what you're doing narratively than what all the teeny tiny, there's not teeny tiny mechanical pieces, there's big, easily applicable mechanical pieces, and then there's the narrative weight that you put behind those mechanical pieces, and that's what makes Cortex into something that can be a really cool experience at the table.
Yeah, I think once it clicks for people, and I think it could take part of a session before like it finally clicks that, oh, I could do that. Or for some people, I think it's like, oh, I'm priming this game for my players. We're switching from D&D for the first time, and it clicks then. Or sometimes it clicks during like character creation. Like whenever it clicks, it's a wonderful thing, I think.
Yeah, I had a big like, oh moment. I was watching. It was actually, there was an event we did where people made a Hammerheads agent in the Discord, and then people voted on who their favorite agents were, and those people got to play in a game with Cam jamming for them. And I watched that game, and I, took some notes and stuff. And watching that game, watching Cam run it, and these amazing people playing it, I was like, oh, I get it. And I think that moment is, like you said, that's what hits at some point. It just like, oh, it clicked. I get this game now.
I would say definitely like for anyone listening, if you want to, we're still like pretty sparse as far as like Cortex actual plays. We have Into the Motherlands, we have Roll and Keep. But if you want to start like getting into Cortex and having it click for you before you hit the table, one potential way is maybe to like look at the mechanics and literally just watch TV. Because I think Cortex is like far more cinematic, far more the speed of plot type of thing compared to D&D.
Totally. Every time I'm watching a TV show or movie these days, I'm like, ooh, that's this thing. That's this mechanic. This is like, you could totally run this in Cortex.
Yeah, that's when you know you've really got the system, is when you start watching things and it's like, oh, this is totally, the game right here.
Yes. Prime everything.
Do you have any particular like favorite moments, whether funny or just holy crap, Cortex totally made that happen, or whatever have you, in your play experience, Mellie?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is just every time I play, the freedom that I feel to actually just do what I think the character would do, which has led to just really great things. I guess I pull one. I was doing playtesting for Dragon Prince, and I was playing Benetta because she's the best. I'm also playing her in the live stream for Roll and Keep because I love her. She's a Sunfire elf. Sunfire elves are, like touched by the sun. They have kind of fire magic. They forge swords using this magic, so they have these amazing swords that are super hot and can cut through anything. And the GM ended up having this hitch that my brother character had caused this big problem that made this kid we were trying to save fall, like I think, off a tree and fall unconscious. And we had nobody with any kind of medical skills at all. This kid, though, was a Sunfire elf, and it was in a cave or something like that. And I was like, well, could I use my sword to like heal this kid? Because this is the Sunfire. It's from the place where our power comes from. So like, could I just like heal them with it? And then GM was like, sure, roll for it. And I feel like in a lot of other games, you're told exactly like what your things do. And that moment of freedom was like, oh my God, I can just really do any cool thing that makes sense. And it'll be so fun.
Yeah, I've definitely found Cortex is a pretty permissive system when it comes to that sort of stuff, which I think is great too. Definitely, it's all about the narrative and, basically being able to do what you want with it.
Yeah, I think it does the role of cool a better service than just hand waving something, right? Because I think Cortex not only lets people do the rule of cool, but it's supported by the mechanics.
Yeah, it lets you really live that character authentically. Like I was playing a D&D session and it was incredibly fun. The GM was so clever and whimsical and amazing, but there was no combat, so a lot of the things that we have on our character sheets don't do anything. And then the things that we were doing, even though it would make sense for certain characters to have been good at these things, because it's not on their sheet, it doesn't happen. So I've really loved how Cortex can let you do really weird esoteric things, and if it makes sense for your character to be able to do them, that you can just do them, because narratively, of course.
Yeah, we don't need to have like over a couple hundred skills just to be able to represent your character in Cortex, which I think is wonderful. So one of the things that we do on the show is we try to prime a setting or a genre, and we'll even take mashups. Do you have a mashup for us to prime?
Oh boy. I mean, I said witches earlier. Let's mash witches with something. Say witches and cooking. Let's mash that up. There's the name. Boom.
Okay.
Ooh. Witch's Brew. We've got it. All right. Yeah.
Mellie, we have talked about Half-Hearted today. We've talked about the Confab. We've talked about Roll and Keep. Are there anything else you want to plug while we still have you?
Oh man, no, I just say come join the Cortex Discord, watch Roll and Keep, follow us on Twitter for all of the news and everything because it's going to be a very fun year for Cortex.
Awesome. And where can listeners find you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at MellieDM.
It's really cool to get people who are so involved with the Cortex project, if you want to call it that, and just really getting to hear some info and perspectives from people who are just really close to it, I think is always a really cool and unique opportunity. So thank you so much for coming on and talking with us for the hour.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been super fun.
About does it. This has been our interview with the Mellie, the community manager for Cortex and D&D Beyond. We hope that you have great Cortex games and that you enjoy what's coming out in the future. We'll be back in your airwaves soon. You can find us at PBC Podcast at d20radio.com. You can also find us at Twitter at Primed by Cortex. Facebook, we've got community group there. And as we've mentioned earlier, you can find us on the official Cortex Discord. And all that stuff is going to be in the show notes for you. So yeah, till next time, see ya.
Bye.